Hi guys, welcome back. So today we're going to be looking at eleventy.js, how to style eleventy.js using CSS styling. We're also going to be looking at you being able to work with dynamic data in your eleventy project. For example, you could have a sidebar that lists all the navigations like your dashboard, your section page, your create user, all of those stuffs that could be on your sidebar. And most of those things, could be dynamic data coming from the database. You could have list of users which you want to populate in your cards, in your hero page or whatever page it is you want to populate those data. You could have a profile page where you want to display some dynamic data. Just in general, you being able to work with data dynamically in eleventy.js. So this tutorial today will be considering these two things: you being able to style your eleventy.js project using CSS, and you also being able to work with dynamic data. Now, if you checked the last previous video, the link is in the description. I was able to explain the process it takes for you to bootstrap a new eleventy.js project. So take, for example, you want to build a user documentation and you decided to use eleventy.js. You might ask yourself, how do I start the project? Where do I start from? What do I do? Now, I've been able to cover all of those things, and I've been able to explain the process involving you setting up a new eleventy.js project. And that is what we have in our Visual Studio Code editor here. This was the eleventy.js project we set up the last time. If you watched that video, you would see that we were able to cover up a little bit of use working with eleventy.js, where we were able to create a home page, we were able to create an about page, and also being able to work with several template formats. I think I showed you guys how you could work with non-jocks, how you could also work with Markdown. So if you look at this tutorial here, if you look at this code base here, you would see that we were able to work with a Markdown file as our index page, which is the home page, and we're also able to work with an about page file, which is also a Markdown file. And remember, I said if you are working with eleventy.js, you are not subjected, and you are not confined into using one particular kind of template language. If you are a fan of non-jocks, you can use non-jocks. If you're a fan of Markdown, if you're a fan of Liquid, EJS, JavaScript, whatever it is you feel you want to use, HTML also. If you want to use HTML, you could also use HTML. Now, there are several template engines which eleventy.js covers. Now, this is just like a summary of the last video that took care of all of that. Now, today we're going to be looking at how can you style an eleventy.js project. Now, if you look at what we'd be able to make up with the last video, you would see that we didn't do something really enticing. It's just a very simple demo application that just shows up some little contents and all of that. But what happens if you want to work professionally with eleventy.js? How do you do that? How do you bring in CSS in your project? Now, those are the things we're going to be looking at today. And also, how do you bring in dynamic data? Now, we're going to be designing something very simple, something very little, just to show you the usage of CSS in an eleventy.js project, and also to show you the usage of dynamic data. Now, with having explained all of that, let's write some codes, and let's get our hands dirty with some codes. Now, the first thing we're going to be doing here, for you to be able to work with CSS in your eleventy.js project, the very first thing that needs to be done is you would want to create a CSS file. And like I said, if you remember from the last video, I said everything that you are doing in eleventy.js, you need to have an input file, or an input directory rather, and an output directory. Now, when I say input directory, is more like everything that concerns development has to be placed inside of that directory. And for our own case, we're going to be working with the source directory. And for the build project, which is the one that goes into production, the one that goes live, which people make use of, would have to be compiled into the public folder. And that's the reason why if you look at the source folder, you have all the jargons which we've done so far. Everything is inside of the source folder. And if you look at the public folder, it's more of like a compiled and built version. And our business is not on the public folder, so it's nothing to worry about. Now, bringing in the CSS, we would have to, create a new file here that says style.css. Now, inside of the style.css is where we are going to be writing everything that has to do with our CSS. But you might be surprised, like you place a body and you set a background color of red, and you feel like, okay, now I've set a background color of red, but I expect my page, to show up red, but it still doesn't show up, and that's because your application does not know that the style.css file exists. It doesn't know that you have any file called style.css, all right? So you are also the person that has to also do the job of configuring your application to know that right now there is a style.css file which we have to use alongside with the eleventy application. Now, what you just need to do is not something very hard. You just go to your eleventy.js file, which is the configuration file, and you have to just add the eleventy config dot. There's what we call the add pass-through copy. Now, when you say the add pass-through copy, it's more of like you telling your application that you have a file or you have a folder which you want eleventy to be aware about. You want eleventy to know that this folder exists. You want to make use of what is inside of this folder. And in our own case, we just have to point to the source file, and inside of the source file, we're going to point into the style.css file. Now, sorry, this has to go out of here. It's not supposed to be in the return. It's supposed to be outside of the return. Yeah. So now with this, we should be having our page with a background color of red. Okay, we might have to refresh this. Now, there's one thing missing here. If we go to the layout file, we also need to tell the layout file that, okay, right now, we now have a CSS file, and we want that CSS file, to be used in the application. And it's just the normal way. All you need to do is just place in a link, and inside of the link, we're going to call the relative style sheet. So this will be a style sheet. And we'd also have an href, and we're going to be pointing to style.css. Now you save this. If we go back to our application, and now we have our background color as red. That's basically how to apply some little bit of CSS. So we don't really need to use the background color for anything. That was just used to explain to you how CSS is being used in eleventy. And I'm just going to remove the background color from here and just change this to a font family of sans serif, just to have that. Now also, we're going to just add some more contents to our index file. I have some contents from another different project. I'm just going to copy that content and place that inside of here. And same thing also would be applicable to the about file. And in the about file, we're also going to do the same thing and copy this content inside of here, just to have something more, fuller in the application. Now, if we go back to the page, now we have this as our index file, and we have this as our about page file. And now, we've got a couple of CSS which I would like to add, and I'm just going to add this CSS right inside of here, just to give us something more amazing look. Now we have this. Now imagine, for example, whereby you have like a sidebar. Let's assume this is a dashboard, and you have a sidebar, and the sidebar, you have to populate data on the sidebar, and that's where the usage of dynamic data come to play. But before we go into using dynamic data, let's just go into the layout file, then go to the aside, create an aside element, inside of the layout file, and inside of here I'm just going to do this and say 11t demo, and right now I'm just going to create a paragraph, and inside of the paragraph I'm going to create a link. So this is just going to be an href that says this, and here I'll just say dashboard. I think this is. Now if you save this and we check our application, you find out that we now have this dashboard here as our application. That's because, you know, we added an aside element. Now imagine, for example, we have several links on the sidebar. You know, we have up to like 7 links on the sidebar. Now it means this is how it's going to be. Now, from the scenario whereby we could have dynamic data on this sidebar, those data would not be populated directly here. You know, it has to come from probably an API, from a JS file, you know, from another different source. And that's where dynamic data with eleventy plays its part. Now, how does eleventy allow you to use dynamic data? How does it populate dynamic data? If you go to the eleventy docs, it specifies that you can be able to make use of a data folder. Now, when you specify a data folder in eleventy, it automatically tells your application to make use of data here. It doesn't need any pre-configuration. You know, you don't need to write any other thing inside of your eleventy.js file, just the way we added it for this. You don't need to do that for the data. You don't need to do anything like source/data, whatever it is. You don't need all of that. All you just need to do is create the _data folder, and eleventy knows that, okay, the application now has a data folder and we can make use of the data inside of the data folder. Now for our case, we're just going to create a data.js file inside of here, and inside of the data.js file, just a normal JavaScript module.export. I would call this navlinks, and inside of here I'm just going to create several navlinks. So I'm going to call this dashboard. It's also going to have a URL. Then we can have several of these, you know, dashboard, and several of these links. Now let's assume we want to have dashboard, we want to have profile, we want to have appointments, we want to have let's say clinics. Let me just add settings, and finally let me just add logouts. Just random stuff. We don't really need to do so much. Now we've created these links. These links could be links coming from an API. It could be like a normal axios.get, you know, and it's being returned, and it happens to be that navlinks now carries each of these links. Now, how does your application populate these data inside of the page here? Because right now we have the manual links that were inserted by us inside of this layout file. But how do we get these data populated into this file? All you just need to do is, like I said earlier, eleventy already knows about the data folder. So wherever you want to make use of this what do they call it? This file or the data inside of here, you can make use of it directly. All you need to do is just create a loop, and inside of the loop we're going to have for item in data.navlinks. Now why am I saying data.navlinks? Because like I said, data signifies this directory and navlinks signifies this variable that holds all of our navs. Now the item here signifies each single object that exists inside of navlinks. That's what this item signifies. So which means if you want to get the name of a single item, you have to do item.name. If you want to get the URL of a single item, you will have to do item.url. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing here. So we're just going to close this so that we don't run into any issue, and just, close this with an N4. Now, in between this place, we'll pick one of these and paste it there. And now, all we need to do is just have item.name, and inside of here, we'll have item.url. And now we can do away with all of these things which we've written here. And when we load this, when we save this page and refresh it, we should get this. Now this has automatically, applied this particular thing which we have. It has automatically applied the data that is coming in from here. So for example, if this was an API, or you decide to add, let's say, 2 more datas, and just call this, we can call this, let's just call it code, and let's just call this deployment. Now when you go back to your page, you automatically get that. And when you take your mouse and hover on any of them, it gives you the URL. In our case, we decided to make use of just a / as our URL. But if we decide to do something like, let's say, about something like the dashboard, let's assume all of these pages exist. Now you notice that when you go to your page, you automatically have this as localhost 8080, which is our current port, and you have /about. The same thing happens here. You have /dashboard. Here you have whatever it is you have inside of here. Now this is just like a basic usage of dynamic data within your eleventy application. There are several ways to make use of data, and trust me, this is like something that you're going to come across on and on if you want to make use of eleventy.js. Now, having explained how to make use of CSS in an eleventy project and also how to make use of data, there are several other things that eleventy.js carries. Like I said before, you are allowed to play around with a lot of stuff. You can use several template engines. You can use Tailwind CSS. You can decide to use normal CSS. You can make API calls. There are several stuff you can do with eleventy. And what we've just covered here is just like 5% of what eleventy carries. But like I said, this was the focus for this particular video. If you enjoyed this video and you feel there are other things you would want us to cover, if you have maybe several other stuff that's giving you issues in eleventy.js, let's say for example you're trying to do something and you're not able to do it effectively, or you don't understand how it should work, you can give a suggestion of the kind of video you would expect to get. And all you just need to do is, I just need to check it out. If it's a video, or if it's a topic that I feel would benefit a lot of software developers, a lot of website developers, a lot of software engineers, I'm going to put it out there. Just put it in my schedule, make a video about it, and we'll put it out there. Now, that's that. If you enjoyed this video, kindly give us a thumbs up, subscribe, share. The most important thing is you sharing this video to every other developers out there for them to see how to make use of eleventy to build documentation, static documentation, website, blogs, name it, whatever it is you want to build that are very simple. eleventy is like the go-to. And that's being said, I'm going to see you in the next video.